Well, most of us actually can't remember our past lives, but there are people who can, or can remember them unaided. And I think there are certain factors which influence this in the current life. And I've made a short list here. The main one, I think, is born into a culture which accepts reincarnation. Now, certainly in India and amongst Native Americans, there is a tradition of reincarnation. It's part of the culture and it is just accepted. And there are far more incidences of people claiming to remember past lives. This is unaided memory of past lives. And this is accepted by the culture. And I think this is a factor. Now, reincarnation has become accepted in the West by many people, possibly in the modern era, but I don't think it doesn't have the tradition that it has in some cultures. Now, another factor, someone who dies young, in fact in India many cases of children being reincarnated as and coming back and remembering being the previous family. There's quite a number of documented cases of that. And also having unfinished business. Some people perhaps have something that they unfulfilled and they basically restart their lives in order to make it happen, and they will remember the first start that they had in the previous life. So there we are, unfinished business, certainly a factor. In fact, I think unfinished business can be a factor anyway in remembering past lives, whatever the age of death. Crystallization, some past life inner work that has resulted in being able to remember past lives. I think that past life recall is a part of inner work. If you become spiritually developed, you will ultimately begin to recall past lives. And I do think that if you actually believe in reincarnation in this life, and you study it and you think about it enough, then there will be a tendency possibly for that to have an effect in a future life. I mean, certainly I've always believed in reincarnation, and whether that comes through from a past life, and I believed in it when I was probably about 4 or 5, the idea of living again occurred to me, and I don't know if that was suggested to me by somebody in this life or whether it was just there anyway. Now, an omni-focused attitude to time. Some people see everything as happening at once, in a sort, well, certainly in this life, in a sort of blocked life. That seems to influence recall of other lives. The idea that the other lives are there are almost in a way relevant and parallel. I think that's possibly where that comes from. But certainly that idea of being omnifocused, and omnifocused people are quite rare, to actually see everything in your life and everything that happens now, has happened and will happen in the future, as sort of happening at once. Most people are either forward focused, future focused, past focused or present focused. Omnifocused people are quite hard to come by. A traumatic death, yes. And sometimes that's possibly better left forgotten, but yes, a traumatic death, and sometimes the circumstances of the death are remembered. Or perhaps there's some crystallization at the point of death which makes the recall more likely. That's maybe the case. And a belief that one is spiritually different from others. There's somebody possibly who has done inner work in a previous life and somehow is aware innately of the cycle of death and rebirth, and that makes them, their thinking will be different than if you just believe in the one life, or you come upon reincarnation at a later stage in your life rather than believing it inherently. So that possibly would be a factor, that you just come in and you believe. I believe in it anyway, but unfortunately I can't remember past lives. So that would be a factor. Now, if you can't remember past lives and you want to, you can have a go, but there are some pitfalls. There's some advantages, but there are some pitfalls. So I'll put another sheet up for this. Okay, calling up past life memories. Okay, then there's pluses and minuses in calling up past lives. Now, firstly, there's a big plus. It may form part of inner work and spiritual development. Yes, that spiritual development will bring about an awareness of past lives and eventually specific recall. And I think that's probably it's part of spiritual development, a very beneficial thing. It may relieve an underlying discontent. There may be something that you've been unhappy about in this life, an unease, or even an inner anger, and you don't know where it comes from. And this may be rooted in a past life, and getting at it may relieve the tension. Of course, that make it worse as well. It depends on your, whether you're prepared to cope with it. But if there's a problem, then possibly that may be the best way of tackling it. May satisfy a curiosity. Some people are desperate to know what's happened to them in past lives, and that may again be part of some underlying discontent rooted in past lives. So, okay, those are generally on the plus side. On the minus side, it may unleash a concealed trauma. There are certain things possibly left buried until you're spiritually able to deal with them. And it's sort of some pretty horrendous things may have happened in a past life, and perhaps you're better off not knowing about them. After all, it can be difficult enough dealing with stuff that's happened in your current life, without adding stuff from past lives to it as well. So that's one to watch. May call them the karmic overdraft. Now, okay, you may have some negative karma that will eventually have to pay off, but calling it a past life, you may get a final demand for some pretty horrendous or some pretty negative karma. Something to watch with that one, and it's a risk I think everybody that goes into past life regression, other than by inner work, risks. I think that's always there. And lastly, you may get drawn into a fantasy world, sort of believing you were King Arthur, or the life that you're living now is the important one. What you were doing 500 years ago may be very interesting, and then maybe you possibly have a reason for knowing about it, but the life you're living now is the one in which you're facing the challenges, in which you're learning and developing. So retreating into a past life and to the fantasy and excitement of past life is it's not really the best course of action, not really the best way forward. Now, if you're intent, having seen this, on bringing up past life memories, I've got some suggestions for how you might do it. So we have methods of past life recall. Right. Well, firstly, channeling and inner work. Always recommended. You make spiritual progress, and you will be able to recall past lives and deal with whatever is there in those past lives. Psychic development. Not quite the same thing as inner work. Psychic development and spiritual progress are mutually independent. You can develop psychic powers and not be spiritually developed, and spiritually developed people probably have some psychic ability, but it's not their priority. But psychic development, you may open up psychic faculties and recall past lives. Psychic assistance, you may employ the assistance of a clairvoyant to look into your past lives, who may be able to read past lives within you. That's an option. And hypnotic regression, possibly that's probably one of the best known. Arnold Bloxham is probably one of the big pioneers in Britain with that back in the 1960s, and appears to have achieved spectacular results. The problem is of the idea of what you might be opening up. It is a shortcut, and you can be careful possibly if you're nervous about being hypnotised. Perhaps that's not for you. The Christos method. Now you require 3 people for this, and it is based on awakening the pineal gland, and some spectacular results have been claimed for this. So then we have the Christos method. Now, divination. Yes, some tarot readers can give indications of past lives and look into what's happened in past lives that's affecting what's happening in the current life. And the map and pendulum. So if anyone wants to try this and tries this and has any results with it, let me know. What you do is you take a map and a pendulum. We've all got pendulums, I think. I don't think everybody's got maps these days. We've all got sat navs. You take preferably a map of Britain, but it can be a map of anywhere. We take a map of Britain, and you douse the pendulum over it until eventually, it mightn't take too long, it takes off. And you make a note of the area that it's taken off over, and but get a larger scale map, even larger scale maps, and eventually identify from where the pendulum is active somewhere. And this is, I forgot to mention, I should have said this at first, you need to be thinking about past lives when you start this. So already thinking about past lives and dowsing the pendulum on progressively larger maps, and eventually you find somewhere on a fairly detailed map that the pendulum takes off over. You identify a locality, and that is said to be the location in which you spent time in a previous life. Then the next thing to do is to actually travel to that area and see what you can remember. If anybody tries that and has any results with it, I'd be interested to know. But it's an idea for consideration. So there we have it, the methods of past life recall. I've gone through the pluses and minuses, and I think we've got everybody thinking now. I certainly feel that possibly past life recall, other than remembering it naturally, is something to be extremely cautious of.